Hiya! Today we're looking at the Doepfer A-196 PLL. This episode has been sponsored by Ryan Therapy Banana, who is one of my $10 patrons on my Patreon page. You do sponsor me on Patreon, don't you? Who requested a video on the PLL. This is one of those modules that I think a lot of people kind of may not have on their radars, and if they have, they're like, okay, I don't know what that is. Nonetheless, our complete lack of understanding shouldn't preclude us from doing some cool-ass shit with it, but I will attempt to explain what it is. In a musical sense, it's like a wonky, funky sync pal. So, for example, if you kind of want another oscillator because you're like, man, I want some interesting extra stuff, maybe I want a wave folder, maybe I want another VCO, consider getting a PLL because it's a pretty cheap module and it basically does give you another oscillator that can track 1 volt per octave. But as you're going to see, the PLL is beset by all its own weird little idiosyncrasies and oddness. I can tell you it does give you this awesome kind of strange, wonky, gribbly, weird, portamento-y, squeaky synth thing. Plus there's some nice applications with frequency multiplication that we're going to look at. The module itself is made up of 3 blocks. 1 is a voltage controlled oscillator. 2 is the phase comparator section. It's going to compare the voltage control oscillator with an external signal that you are putting in. And then that, by its nature quite a wonky signal, is fed into a low-pass filter, which I don't think this is actually very well named, because yeah, it may be a low-pass filter, but it'd be better to call it slew. The phase comparator section here has got 2 inputs. By its nature, it has to, because it's actually going to be phase comparing input 1, the built-in oscillator, with an external signal. So it's going to look at these 2 signals, and it's going to say, hey, input 1, my basic VCO is going at such and such speed, and your external input here that's going at a different speed. It might be higher or it might be lower than the original speed. And what will happen is, depending on that, is it's going to compare the 2 and it's going to try and make its internal oscillator go at the same rate as your external. And you've got 3 different tracking modes built into this thing. And I could tell you what they're called, but that really wouldn't mean anything. Even Doepfer kind of say you've just got to mess around and play with them. They're all 3 are different. They all track in a kind of good and a bad way. So to give you an example, let us just actually hear the flipping thing. Where the flip is my flipping thing? Oh, flip a thing. Right, so here we go. So that's my output. And then let's take the output of the Atlantis's primary square oscillator, because it tracks better with squares, and put it into the single input. So the Atlantis is doing a kind of high-low sound, and I'll blend that in so you can hear. That's the Atlantis. That's the PLL. So it's doing a pretty good job of tracking the Atlantis. Now we're just hearing the PLL. You get kind of nice PWM effects. That's the PLL. That's my original signal. So hopefully you're starting to get like an application. It's like, hey, here's a cool, interesting... It's just like an extra interesting signal that's kind of tracking, but not doing it perfectly. So here's a very fruity thing. This is the output of the Erica Synth Black Wavetable VCO. This little puppy. That is the main output. Very cool. But this thing has a sub, and it can output a square wave. So if I take that square wave and I feed that into 1 here. And then the actual output of the machine wavetable VCO is obviously like a wavetable, and that's coming in here. So it's trying to compare a square wave sub-octave with the output of the VCO itself, which is a weird signal, which is going to struggle to track. And that sounds a bit like this. Nutty. It's like an angry puppy. So this is a good example of just feeding it difficult signals and seeing what it does. So, original signal, PLL. PLL alone. Sweet. This weird little slice of sickness is the radio music, outputting a little kind of loop of speech, something off of Tom Whitwell's library, and that, via the green cable, is going into a maths to be amplified, and then going back into the signal input. And the phase lock loop is trying to track it. It's in mid-range mode, type 3. And the VCO that's purring in the background is the phase lock loops VCO, because the speech is only coming in periodically, so it's only trying to track periodically. It tries to sing along, which it can't. Ooh. And then going through the Atlantis. Ace. One of the key things that Doepfer say that the A-196 can be used for is frequency multiplication. Now, as in literally multiplying a VCO to get a higher frequency out. Now, weirdly, you do this with the addition of a divider. So you need a clock divider module. Now, this could be the Doepfer A-160, or in this case, the Nobot's upcoming divide module, which I am using, and bizarrely use a division to create a multiplication. So you get a higher signal out. Right, so like literally, do you see on my scope? This is the original, and that's the divided by 2. If I use thirds, look, it's literally divided by, multiplied by 3. You divide by 3, you multiply by 3. As you adjust the frequency, you get a whoa. Look at it, trying to track, doing so slowly. It gets there. You got it. So, basically, if you've got a divider, you've got yourself a very neat way of creating frequency multiplications. So if you run a sequence, and I do have one like this. Faster. Oh yeah, there you go. Music. So that's my Atlantis oscillator paired with my frequency multiplied PLL oscillator, which has got a little bit of a squonk. Doesn't track perfectly, but isn't that what makes it so damn charming? And as you mess with the offset and the frequency, it'll get more weird. But I would say the most fun thing to do is change the division amount, because by changing the division amount, we change the multiplication. So look, and the module's freaking out. Fifths. But for example, if I use the saw, it slides around a lot more. Sine wave? Ooh, that's quite cool. It really kind of squonks. Ace.